I guess I should start this off by telling you what youth group is. Youth group is a place where young people can convene with like-minded individuals. They can establish friendships, get in touch with their spiritual side, and all of that comes with a heaping side of drama! My first youth groups were where I grew up, Indiana. And like I mentioned before, like many social groups, this particular one was filled with drama. Like, TLC could have made an entire series based on ours alone, but I digress. You guys know I have stories, and of course, as per usual, I will be changing names because that's the right thing to do. Of the 3 youth groups I've belonged to over the years, only one of them hasn't had some kind of weirdly devastating scandal attached to them. But we'll talk about those scandals later, because I gotta get the humor out before we get dark. The unfortunate thing about youth groups is, much like school, there are cliques. These cliques oftentimes aren't about hierarchy, usually just interests, but it can get weird and sometimes you can feel left out in certain situations. So here's how it worked if you're not familiar. Some night in the middle of the week, usually Wednesday, you'd go to youth group. It was sort of a way to help break up the week. If you got there early, you'd get to hang out with your friends, talk about what's been going on at school, and catch up, I don't know. After that, there'd be praise and worship, then there'd be some lesson vaguely related to being young. You know, it was your typical stuff. Respect your parents, abstinence. I'm sure there were other things, but those were the main things. You know what I mean. See, I've always thought that youth group should be a place where you discuss social situations and mental health issues. Some examples of these lessons could be, so your parents are getting divorced and it's your fault. Or even, your mom has a drinking problem and she doesn't want to talk about it. How about, so you farted in the middle of English class and everyone heard. Here's how you play that off. After the lesson, you just go home. Now that may sound like middle of the week church, and that's because it is. But your friends were there, you know? If your youth group was cool, there'd be like video games and air hockey and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that's what really separated it from like main church. That and the idea that in youth group you wouldn't talk about finances. At that age, you never really understand why they talk about finances so much. It's so boring. But as you get older, the veil kind of starts to lift on that and you get it more and more. But back to the subject at hand. Sometimes in youth group there'd be dating. And while I met the woman who would end up becoming my wife in youth group, I cannot advise towards dating within one. I think you pretty much only get one shot when you do anyways. Because once you've dated someone within such a small group, the well's pretty much tainted. They're gonna talk. Well, this type of thing only ever normally leads to drama. It's very important that I make a clear distinction here. Scandal and drama are 2 different things. Unless we're talking about scandal, which is a drama. A scandal is something you don't normally come back from, at least not in a public church setting. I only have 2 short stories about this particular subject, but I think that it still is something that I need to talk about. Let me be clear, I'm only going to tell these stories to help lift a veil that's in front of youth groups as a whole. Here we go. I was seeing this girl at school and she invited me to her church's youth group. Now, as excited as I was to, meet her friends and everything at youth group, it did take place on the same night as my regular youth group. The only thing I really remember about their youth group's, aesthetic was that it was, super highly produced. I don't know, it seemed like a kind of, TV set. But that's not really why you go to youth group. Anyways, I only went a few times every few months because, like I said, I had my own youth group. But the place was cool enough. Well, I get a phone call. On one of the nights, I decided to skip their youth group and go to mine. It was my girlfriend at the time. She tells me how everything was going normally, they were all having a good time. Then all of a sudden, the cops show up and arrest the youth pastor. It turns out that he was carrying on an inappropriate relationship with one of the youth group's members. Yeah, needless to say, I never went back. I tried to follow up on this story very recently, and I found an alarming number of cases like that in the immediate area about youth group and pastors, and it was really, really alarming. It turns out that there are dirtbags everywhere waiting to exploit people, and it's really shocking that the one place you think it wouldn't happen, it happens more than you'd like to think. I don't mean to brush off that topic. I know it's very jarring for me to move on, but we'll get back to that. Very briefly, we'll talk about PKs, or pastors' kids. There's an old adage about PKs. They're either the most straight-laced individuals you will ever meet, or they're straight hooligans. This is a story of one such hooligan. So the pastor of my church decided to uproot his family and move to another state. I guess they just decided it was time for them to move on. I don't know. I don't remember. It was main church. So I was like... And as sad as we were, we knew it was time to find a new pastor. Enter Pastor Johnson. Pastor Johnson was actually a pretty cool guy. I remember main church changing its appeal for me about that time because, I don't know, I guess it was just the way he spoke about things. I just remember liking him. I don't know. And along with him came his wife and 3 children, Jeffrey, Kathy, and Scott. Jeffrey, the oldest, was as straight-laced as they came. He was pretty by the book, but he could be funny when he wanted to be. Kathy, I don't really remember Kathy. She just kind of existed. I don't know, middle child syndrome maybe? Then there was Scott. Scott was the kind of PK that had everybody fooled. Like, I mean straight up. He seemed so straight-laced that when I heard about what he did, it was like mind-blowing. Like, I didn't see it coming at all. See, Scott was seeing this girl within our youth group, red flag number 1. Her name was Laura. As the story goes, Scott and Laura had been seeing each other for quite some time. And word got out that they had been doing some rather teenage-related stuff together. If you know what I mean, and I know you do. Well, according to my friend Bridget, who was best friends with Laura, Scott had been pressuring her into doing all kinds of really depressing things. Like, it really takes me back to realize just how controlling he was in their relationship. I mean, looking back, I feel so guilty because I feel like I should have known or realized something was up, but I really didn't. Well, after I moved to Florida, I get a call, to get sort of an update as to what's been going on there. And it comes to my attention that the two were caught canoodling in a church closet. Remember when I told you the difference between drama and scandal? Yeah, the Johnsons up and dipped after that. But you've got to be wondering, but what's the point to all of this? Why are you dogging on youth groups so much? Look, I did not come here to bash youth groups. I loved my youth groups. Aside from the lifelong friends you make there, it's such an honest to goodness great breakup for this week. You don't have to worry about your assignments. You don't have to worry about, who's gonna wear what to homecoming or anything like that. It's just a great place to be. And overall, it's just a really great way to focus on your spiritual infancy. I just believe that there needs to be an open dialogue between youth group members and their parents. A lot of times I could see that parents were just dropping off their kids. Maybe they had their own Bible study to go through, but they never really followed up on what's been going on in their youth group because much like school, teenagers are gonna be teenagers other places. And as unfortunate as it seems, you can't just let things slide just because it's church. You gotta make sure that you're asking questions. And I'm not gonna say that you're gonna find something as earth-shattering as what I was bringing up today, but it still counts. It still matters. And if you're in one of those situations or you know someone who's in one of those situations, you have to speak up. Like I mentioned before, there are predatory people everywhere. And it's not just church leaders. It's not just, people of authority. It's sometimes those teenagers within the group too. Talk to someone. It's all of our responsibilities to keep places like youth groups what they're supposed to be, a great place for fellowship and growth. Thanks for watching.